The mark of the great humorist is to make his pain into your amusement. After an accident, James Thurber lost his left eye as a 6-year-old boy. His good one got worse and worse, and by his 40s, he was headed towards total blindness. It had the expected withering result on his temper, his sanity, his life, but he continued to mine it for humor until the day he died. Tonight's story is from his 1933 masterpiece, My Life in Hard Times. As usual, it takes something real, like his vision, and quickly turns it absurd, creating a Dr. James Thurber. And also, as usual, I'm reading from the Library of America, Thurber, Writings and Drawings, edited by Garrison Keillor. To the confused days of America during the First World War and abridged for time, Draft Board Nights by James Thurber. The Columbus Draft Board never called grandfather for service, which was a lucky thing for them because they would have had to take him. There were stories that several old men of 80 or 90 had been summoned in the confusion, but somehow or other, grandfather was missed. He waited every day for the call, but it never came. My own experience was quite different. I was called almost every week, even though I had been exempted from service the first time I went before the medical examiners. Either they were never convinced that it was me, or else there was some clerical error in the records, which was never cleared up. Anyway, there was usually a letter from me on Monday ordering me to report for examination on the second floor of Memorial Hall the following Wednesday at 9 p.m. The second time I went up, I tried to explain to one of the doctors that I had already been exempted. "You're just a blur to me," I said, taking off my glasses. "You're absolutely nothing to me," he snapped sharply. I had to take off all my clothes each time and jog around the hall with a lot of porters and bank presidents' sons and clerks and poets. Our hearts and lungs would be examined, and then our feet, and finally our eyes. That always came last. When the eye specialist got around to me, he would always say, "Why, you couldn't get in the service with sight like that." "I know," I would say. Then a week or two later, I would be summoned again and go through the same rigmarole. The 9th or 10th time I was called, I happened to pick up one of the several stethoscopes that were lying on a table, and suddenly, instead of finding myself in the line of draft men, I found myself in the line of examiners. "Hello, doctor," said one of them, nodding. "Hello," I said. That, of course, was before I took my clothes off. I might have managed it naked, but I doubt it. I was assigned, or rather drifted, to the chest and lung section, where I began to examine every other man, thus cutting old Dr. Ridgway's work in two. "I'm glad to have you here, doctor," he said. I passed most of the men that came to me, but now and then I would exempt one just to be on the safe side. I began by making each of them hold his breath and then say, "Me, me, 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 me," until I noticed Ridgway looking at me curiously. He, I discovered, simply made them say, "Ah," and sometimes he didn't make them say anything. Once, I got hold of a man who, it came out later, had swallowed a watch to make the doctors believe there was something wrong with him inside. It was a common subterfuge. Men swallowed nails, hairpins, ink, etc. in an effort to be let out. Since I didn't know what you were supposed to hear through a stethoscope, the ticking of the watch at first didn't surprise me. But I decided to call Dr. Ridgway into consultation because nobody else had ticked. "This man seems to tick," I said to him. He looked at me in surprise but didn't say anything. Then he thumped the man, laid his ear to his chest, and finally tried the stethoscope. "Sound as $1, he said. "Listen lower down," I told him. The man indicated his stomach. Ridgway gave him a haughty, indignant look. "That is for the abdominal men to worry about," he said, and moved off. A few minutes later, Dr. Blythe Ballamy got around to the man and listened, but he didn't blink an eye. His grim expression never changed. "You have swallowed a watch, my man," he said sharply. The draftee reddened in embarrassment and uncertainty. "On purpose?" he asked. "That I can't say," the doctor told him, and went on. I served with the draft board for about 4 months. Until the summonses ceased, I couldn't leave town, and as long as I stayed and appeared promptly for examination, even though I did the examining, I felt that technically I could not be convicted of evasion. During the daytime, I worked as a publicity agent for an amusement park, the manager of which was a tall, unexpected young man named Byron Landis. Some years before, he had dynamited the men's lounge in the State House Annex for a prank. He enjoyed pouring buckets of water on sleeping persons, and once he had barely escaped arrest for jumping off the top of the old Columbus Transfer Company building with a homemade parachute. He asked me one morning if I would like to take a ride in the new Scarlet Tornado, a steep and wavy roller coaster. I didn't want to, but I was afraid he would think I was afraid, so I went along. It was about 10 o'clock, and there was nobody at the park except workmen and attendants and concessionaires in their shirt sleeves. We climbed into one of the long gondolas of the roller coaster, and while I was looking around for the man who was going to run it, we began to move off. Landis, I discovered, was running it himself. But it was too late to get out. We'd begun to climb, clickety-clockety, up the first steep incline, down the other at which we careened at 80 miles an hour. "I didn't know you could run this thing!" I bawled at my companion as we catapulted up a 60-degree arch and looped headlong in his face. "I didn't either," he bawled back. The racket and the rush of the air were terrific as we roared into the pitch-black cave of darkness and came out and down Monahan's Leap, so called because a workman named Monahan had been forced to jump from it when caught between two approaching experimental cars while it was being completed. That trip, although it ended safely, made a lasting impression on me. It is not too much to say that it has flavored my life. It is the reason I shout in my sleep, refuse to ride on the elevated, keep jerking the emergency brake in cars other people are driving, have the sensation of flying like a bird when I first lie down, and in certain months can't keep anything on my stomach. During my last few trips to the draft board, I went again as a draft prospect, having grown tired of being an examiner. None of the doctors who'd been my colleagues for so long recognized me, not even Dr. Ridgway. When he examined my chest for the last time, I asked him if there hadn't been another doctor helping him. He said there had been. "Did he look anything like me?" I asked. Dr. Ridgway looked at me and said, "I don't think so. He was taller. A good pulmonary man." Draft Board Nights by James Thurber. I'm Keith Olbermann. Good night and good luck.